I want to thank you for another episode of Real Talk. We want to thank our sponsors at Park Bank. Thank you for Facebook Journalism Project. Thank you for all that you're doing. We have someone today, I'm smiling because we go way back, and East Side guy, I've known him for a long, long time. And this dude is 60, but he looks like he's 20. It's what you say, like, I look older than him, and this guy's like, so this guy has aged well. He used to be an older person for District 12, I believe. And he's worked at community centers. People on the north side, east side will know this person extremely well. He's jumped in a very competitive race. So it's good to hear his voice. Mr. Brian Benford, how are you, sir?
I'm doing really great, Henry. Thank you so much for the time today. And thank you for all that you do with Madison 365 and Real Talk. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's jump in this. Brian, why get back in the political game? I mean, it's brutal. It was always difficult, but it seems more brutal now than it was then. Why jump in?
Well, before I answer that question, just indulge me, Henry. Can I ask you a quick question?
For sure.
So I've been in Madison since 1979, and I know you grew up here in Madison. Yeah. And in our wildest dreams, would we ever had thought that we would see 5 candidates of color running for a Wisconsin State Senate race?
Never.
And then I have to add that the other legislative races, too. We never thought we would see that. So when I think about that, the history is not lost on me. And what I'm really amazed about with the 5 candidates of color, that there's this commonality. We're all different. I haven't met anybody in person, but the commonality that binds us all is that through our lived life experiences living in a racist, oppressive, brutal world, I often say that we're living in a world with 2 diseases that are so prevalent and that has affected society on every level, and that's COVID-19 and that's racism. That when I look at all the people in this race of color, that binds us. And from living with that experience and living in an indifferent society with indifferent policymakers, I believe that's our common call to action. So I decided to run because I have the great privilege of working for the UW-Madison Odyssey Project. That, as you had mentioned earlier, Henry, I spent the last 30 years working on the front lines with the most marginalized and vulnerable people in our community. I've sat with mothers that had to decide what they were going to do with their kids versus letting them sleep in cars. Every day in my role at the Odyssey Project, I'm helping people stay in their houses, find medicine, find quality physical and mental health services. And the list goes on as we live in, once again, this society that has oppressed us for well over 400 years. So as I looked around, and I have about 500 people that are on my caseload, the vast majority are suffering during this pandemic and will so in the aftermath of this for some years to come. Well, we all know, I'm sorry to state the obvious, that many of these issues and problems have been going on long before COVID-19 hit. So this just ripped the veneer off and put a spotlight on all the social injustices that people of color have to endure and people from different backgrounds. So as I thought about my capacity, I recently went back to school to get my master's in social work from the UW-Madison School of Social Work. And I had the goal of becoming a therapist, getting my clinical hours where I can serve the most marginalized and vulnerable people. But then I felt this call of action, and not to sound corny or cheesy, but I had this tremendous epiphany that we need different perspectives at the state capitol. We need new diverse leaders that have these lived experiences and can truly relate to what so many people in our community are going through. So I just felt like I had no choice, Henry. I felt like I had to bring my experiences working in community-based organizations as a former alderperson, as a former president of the Madison Equal Opportunities Commission. And I had to do all that I can, because I have to tell you that when I look at the protests going on and see all these beautiful, amazing, diverse, passionate young leaders out there impacting change, that I know that more has to be done than just at the policy level. So if I had the fortune of being elected the next state senator for the 26th district, I'll fight for all of these kids that are out in the street. And I want to talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah. So you just hit a lot of different issues. I would say time has changed a lot since when you were alderperson. As you mentioned, that there's more diversity now running, but the people of color have more of a voice now than they ever had, I think, in the city. And I think before you ran as you're a progressive Dane guy, weren't you a progressive Dane guy, or weren't you?
I was a Green Party guy, a progressive Dane guy, a Democrat guy, hanging on to some socialism and wearing it proudly. I was doing it all.
A little bit of everything, yeah.
Every party, especially the party of my 5 kids.
Amen to that. I get that. So the spectrum has just changed, and so where does Brian Benford fit in today's spectrum of politics? Because I think before I would have said you were more of the far left guy, like progressive Dane, socialism. I think the party has kind of moved left, actually. So where do you think that where you are in the spectrum now of how you would set your agenda? How do you think you fit?
Well, Henry, that's an amazing question, and I want to answer it in a couple parts. That absolutely, so much has changed since I left office in 2007 as an alderperson. But yet, once again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I really hate stating the obvious. Social issues and problems have not changed. They just amplify. And what we're seeing today is a residual of folks my age, my generation, who just didn't get it done. So these kids are in the street, and I hope that we can take the time and listen and be inspired and support their efforts. So how I fit in the political spectrum, not to sound cavalier, but I've never really cared much about political ideology. In social work and in so many other venues, we talked about intersectionality, all the things that make us. I had mentioned I'm a father of 5, a longtime community activist, organizer, family advocate, educator. I like to think that even though my spirituality is non-traditional, I hold deeply the belief that we really need to come together and express love to make these changes to forge a better future. So when I think about, and it's natural, it's a wonderful question because ultimately people really look at that. And what I would say is that when I'm elected as the next state senator, that it's the people's voices that really matter more so than my own. Certainly I have opinions and I might have political leanings and slants, but what's really important is that I'll take the time to engage with my constituents, listen to their concerns, help to educate, help to raise level awareness around key important issues, and give my heart and soul to fight for making positive change and bringing us all together during these uncertain times.
What do you think? What are you running on? What are like the key issues that you really want to focus on? I think I heard you say, because and this is not me. Brian and I are friends, just for transparency. I know Brian well. But what he's saying is true. He's done so much. He's always been education. He's always been the community. This has always been who he is. So is your platform be basically community organizations? It's going to be education, kids. That just seems like who you are. Is that what your platform's going to be running on?
Man, you know me all too well, Henry, that is part of the platform. But I want to be really clear to the people that are tuning in today that the number one priority, the number one platform is once again addressing these 2 insidious diseases that are in our midst right now that are ravaging the city of Madison, the state of Wisconsin, and this country as a whole. That I believe that we really have to look at the inequities that COVID-19 has shown us. And this is the time to forge a new, better future. I don't want to go back to normal. I don't want to go back to the way things are. That I believe that if we come together, that this is an amazing opportunity to build a new future. So when I think about that, of course, education, once again, I work for the UW-Madison Odyssey Project, and they epitomize the Wisconsin ideal, unlike anything I've ever seen, where they create a free year-long course in the humanities, and then they form a holistic support network to help people obtain higher education, to eliminate the barriers and challenges that are in front of them. I think education is critical. In the time of COVID, we're going to lose so much of our tax base because of the detrimental economic times that we're in. So as a state, we have to really look at education as a human right, as a priority, and we have to fund and do everything that we can to not only support our educational system, but once again to eliminate these horrible racial disparity gaps within education, within prisons, and so on. So that all of our platform and all of our priorities will be based on addressing COVID right now, in the future, and years to come. So with that, I think about how do we get out of COVID-19 from a real scientific, practical point. I think we have to really expand Medicaid and Badger Care and really look to be a model in universal health care for all the citizens, so that we can ensure that everyone has free treatment, everyone has free testing, and when a vaccine, and I say when because it'll happen, is developed, that everyone will have free access to it. So then when you think about, once again, how COVID relates to economic issues, that during this time, we've all read in the paper about the debacle with unemployment insurance and how so many people are struggling, and even people are still waiting for checks, that we have to do something to immediately expand unemployment insurance. I would even go as so far to say that for every person that's hurting in the state of Wisconsin, let's really consider giving them a $2,000 during the COVID check every month so that they could survive. As we think about, once again, economic opportunities, a new Green Deal, as we create a new infrastructure at the end of the COVID. So I have many issues that I'm passionate about, but Henry, number one, I mentioned these two diseases. I think that during this pandemic and the world that we live in, with these insidious racial acts that we're seeing, not just recently, but throughout my 60 years of living, that we as a society, as a city, as a state, we have to come together to address those. So that's where I'll put most of my energy. I want to add one more thing. I'm sorry for the long-winded question, but I am passionate about these issues. That in my leadership, being 60 years old, I always thought that a true political leader really reaches down to try to bring up new emerging leaders and team them with seasoned leaders so they can go back in their communities and affect positive change. Once I'm elected, that the office in the Capitol will belong to the people, and I like to think that it would be a learning lab for young activists, advocates, people that want to affect tremendous policy changes, that they would have a hub there where we can grow emerging leaders. I'm not a career politician. I'm a social worker, not trying to stay in to 95. I give Senator Visser all the respect and credit. He served amazingly for so many years, but that's not what I believe in. I believe in bringing in new leaders. So those are the issues and priorities that our platform is centered around.
So how does someone run right now? How do you do a campaign with COVID-19 and social distancing? Because historically you went by doors, right? You do indoors, have a volunteer, have a team, you always got to do your calls and stuff. You can still do that. But how are you reaching people now? Like what do you do to campaign?
Oh man, that is really, once again, an amazing question, because there's no playbook for campaigning in a pandemic. That we run a true grassroots campaign, and now that might come off as sounding a little hokey or corny, but when I decided to do this, I'm carrying the hearts and souls of all the thousands of people that I've served over the years in my heart. And as I move forward, I'm committed to keeping money out of politics. So for every dollar spent on a political campaign, every dollar, I could use that money to help keep someone in their apartment, to help them buy medicine that they need, diapers for their babies, food, the basic needs. So we're committed in running a true grassroots campaign. So I jumped in this race really, really late. I jumped in around May 20th. In 11 days, Henry, we went out and collected well over 770 signatures. And the way we did that is we formed a coalition of people that believe that we're tired of politics as they are traditionally, and that this has almost become a movement. So we had grandparents out, we had neighbors setting up collection stations. We tapped into some really brilliant young people from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, really dedicated social activists that have formed the nucleus of my team. And we really got out there, and you're right, I miss knocking those doors. I still have tendonitis in my knuckles from pounding doors on the north side. Just as a side note, there's no doors on the north side with doorbells. So I got arthritis for the rest of my life. And I miss that visceral connections, those really intentional one-on-one human connections. And I think that's what's missing from democracy, and that's missing from most of our political leaders. So we'll be extremely creative. We got some really exciting events that are coming up where we're going to do an old barnstorming safely tour, where we'll go into neighborhoods and safely try to get our message out. These young folks know a lot about social media. I was joking with Nate earlier that I still have an 8-track at home. So I'm learning from their brilliance and learning a whole new world. And still, even with COVID, I walk around my neighborhood. I'm an avid biker. I stay out, and I love those connections from a safe distance. I've had hundreds of amazing conversations talking about the most difficult issues, from racism to all the inequities that are going on, with some really brilliant, well-intended people that are diving deep to self-reflect, maybe for the first time in their lives. So I feel like we're getting the message out there. We won't have TV commercials because, once again, that money spent is, to me, it's a shame. It's horrendous in this day and age with a pandemic going on, that big money would jump in and try to sway these kind of races. So it's all about people power, all about people versus money.
Well, Brian, thank you for your time. Thank you for, jumping in. We always need people to serve. And running for office is not easy. It's a hard task, sometimes a thankless task. And so thank you for doing it. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your 60 years of in the game and loving people. So no matter what happens, thank you sincerely for all that you've done for our community, all you plan to do for our community. And, we wish you well, man. You're like a 7-person race, I think. So it's a competitive race. And so it'll be interesting how this shakes out, especially COVID-19. But thank you, friend. Thank you for your time, and we wish you the best.
Thank you, Henry. Virtual hug. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
There you go, brother.
Don't let go. Don't let go, Henry. Take care now.
Hey, thank you. And we'll see you next time on Real Talk.